Call to order the meeting of the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority for June 5th, 2013. Susan, please call the roll.
Newcomb Clark. Here. Russ Collins. Bob Gutzel.
Here.
Lee Gunn.
Here.
Roger Hewitt.
Here.
John Heachow. John Lowenstein.
Here.
John Moa.
Here.
Nader Nassif. Keith Orr.
Here.
Sandy Smith.
Here.
John Split. We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is audience participation. We have on our list of people who signed up, Nancy Stone. Would you come forward and tell us what you want to say?
And I do appreciate this opportunity to thank the DDA for your ongoing support of the annual A2 Blues Day, which we just had a couple weeks ago. And if we think back at how this support of this event has helped mentor a real change in the downtown area, we just have to go back 25 years when it was called Downtown Cleanup Day. Instead of A2 Blooms, our volunteers were out there literally sweeping streets, taking care of litter, minimal planting, and today it is a festival of over 350 people that join us and plant flowers, beautify the city, and is something people look forward to year-round. I'd like to mention a couple key partners that are the merchant associations, of course the DDA in the city, but also Pizza House provided 70 pizzas for the volunteers. State Street Association provides the event t-shirts, and this year we had Kind Healthy Snacks, and I brought the extras here to share with you as well. Enough of my talking. I have a 1-minute video that was put together by one of the youth groups that participated, and I think it gives you a real flavor of what this event is offering the community today. And of course, it worked perfectly before you arrived.
That's always the way.
And I'm so glad it's Jada that made that happen.
So did it turn itself off and now it's warming back up, or? Oh, now it's back on.
There we go. Okay.
And we just have to hum along because there's cute music that goes with it. But the visuals will do the story itself. And this group, this is their 3rd year of actively volunteering. And we also recognize them, and our city council gave them a volunteer recognition on Monday.
Great.
Thank you so much for bringing that. That really means a lot to us, and we appreciate your efforts on doing this. That is really great. And thank you, Newcomb. It's a young person to figure it out.
I just made it worse.
Actually, I was at the meeting and it was very cute. 4 kids got up and John did his thing. He did great. It was very nice.
At City Council, yeah.
Yeah.
The next item, a person on our list is Brad Moore from the Varsity Project. Hi.
Good afternoon. I'm the associate architect of the Varsity Project. We're asking for some contractual parking to meet our parking requirement. I think we've been through this once before, but we didn't get quite enough spaces last time, so we're here for a few more. And I'm just here to answer any questions if you have.
Thank you. Ray Denner, you're up.
This advisory council met last night, and we spent the whole hour and a half, discussing what it is I'm about to present. Because this was the decision of the group that met last night. It was over 2 years ago that the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council joined other neighborhood groups in supporting the passage of the new downtown A2D2 zoning and approval of new design guidelines and design guidelines review board process. Although compliance to design review board suggestions was voluntary, we believe that the board recommendations would serve to educate developers, architects, planners, and the entire community on possibilities for improving downtown building design. You all know that on May 13th of this year, just a few weeks ago, many of us were present when all members of the City Council were unanimous, and that is unanimous, in opposing the design, mass, and scale of the proposed student housing development at 413 East Huron. It would clearly have a negative impact upon its neighbors. The proposed traffic patterns threatened a real danger to public health and safety. Council then proceeded to vote 6-5 in favor of the project because 6 members of City Council feared we might face a lawsuit on a by right, in quotation marks, project that met the requirements of the D1 zoning. It's obvious from that discussion and that decision that there's something lacking with our D1 zoning and our design guidelines and design review process. There are currently other sensitive areas of D1 beyond 413 that have been similarly zoned. Lots along East End from North Division to South 5th, site to the east of Sloan Plaza, perhaps the Amos site, perhaps the former YMCA site. There are real conflicts between our D1 downtown zoning and the zoning of nearby historic and residential neighborhoods, perhaps with city master plans in general. And we now have an opportunity to change that. And it should be a process we feel open to. That does not mean there wasn't public input in the earlier one. There was, a lot of it. It only means that experience requires that we do a better job at this particular point in correcting perhaps areas where it needs improvement. In the case of D1, that means, as far as we're concerned, that it must not be left up to an ordinance revision committee made up of planning commissioners unless there's a lot of public input, which is also added to those meetings. Currently, that's not the case. We hear from a lot of people who think that we should not be giving FAR also. We should not be giving FAR premiums for things that we no longer want as a community. Student housing, for one thing. We can take this opportunity also to change that. Maybe some people say a moratorium is necessary while we make up our minds about these issues. The same thing is true of the design guidelines and design guidelines process. We made tremendous strides when we did them over 2 years ago. A lot of work was done, but we need to improve the design guidelines. Better defining character areas is one example, resolving conflicts in zoning areas, including historic residential neighborhoods and D1 areas is another. It's important to consider context and possible negative impacts as well, which the Connecting Williams Street group actually did in the shaping really of possibilities with regard to the downtown sites, but that was on city property. We need to do that also on private property. We don't want 413 to happen again. Possible changes in guidelines and design guidelines board process are due on September 16th. The process of approving D1 zoning is due October 1st. That's not far away. And as of the meeting last night, there's no real schedule there in terms of getting this done. But no one is going to be satisfied with what we do in considering change unless we have an open process that includes public input. And we've seen that public input. Sometimes it only amounts to meeting in the public library and letting everybody come around tables to discuss the nature of the issues that are involved. So that we all know what it is that people feel with regard to these things, and then we can work in the direction of making improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Next item on our agenda is communications from the DDA chair, who is me. The Collaborative Task Force on Economic Development was formed by City Council, and they asked for 3 DDA members to be appointed to that, and I am appointing John Mowat, Bob Gunzel, and Susan Polly to serve, and I appreciate their accepting that appointment. The next item is the question as to whether or not we want to keep the July 3rd meeting as is, it's the day before the 4th, or change it to the next week. What is your pleasure? Is it all right to keep it on the 3rd, or
I won't be here.
you won't be here? Is there, everyone else will be here? So, shall we keep it on the 3rd? I'm not seeing any objections. Okay, we will. It's scheduled for that. And also, just to remind you, we have scheduled the August meeting not to happen, as usual. The last item I would like to mention is the City Council resolution requesting DDA funding for downtown police officers is on pages 2 and 3 of your packet. And this is a request where they want us to spend our money in a certain way. And I am referring this to the Operations Committee, which will meet and discuss it. And I think they probably need to talk to the police chief and a number of other community members to talk about this. Are there communications from DDA members at this time? Mayor Giefter.
I had an idea that I discussed briefly at the Mayor's Downtown Marketing Task Force yesterday, and it's just something for a committee to take up. But I was at Farmers Market a few weeks ago. It was a beautiful sunny day, and then it was over in Sculpture Plaza. And there was this group of U of M music school students, for the most part. An interesting array of instruments they were playing: an accordion, a stand-up bass, a mandolin, and a saxophone. And it was very nice music that was drawing a crowd. And so people were getting food in the co-op and bringing it out and sitting around, and it was very pleasant. And I recall times that mostly I remember a few summers ago being in Montreal, and my wife and I saw some street performers, and we talked to them afterwards because they were very good, and said, oh, well, we get a stipend for doing this. And I would just like to see us explore the idea of what may be $100 an occasion to sponsor some of these types of spontaneous, now they wouldn't be quite so spontaneous, events that might occur in just providing interest. And I think it's a program that might spend $2,000 a year but could have a huge benefit in making it more interesting to be in the downtown, more appealing, having things like this show up, appearing to be spontaneous. But it would also, I think, make it a little easier for the folks who do this to schedule it. They had a hat out. They were getting some dollar bills in there. There was even a 5 in there. And so they were doing okay, and they could still do that. But I would just like to see us take a look at a simple little program like that that could show up, not drawing a big crowd, but just something acoustic, maybe they had one speaker about this big. But just to take a look at that, and I think it would add a lot of life to what is already a very lively downtown.
Okay, we could perhaps discuss that in partnerships. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anything else from DDA board members? Roger.
There's been at City Council quite a bit of discussion about modifying the DDA ordinance, amending that ordinance. I believe that has been postponed until September. Yesterday, Bob and Susan and I did have a very informal conversation with several council members discussing the ordinance, and we're going to continue to discuss that. Also, there was a connector study meeting that I was not at, but I believe Susan was at. I think the most important item out of that is on, I believe it's the 18th, there will be another public outreach, the connector study at the downtown library in the evening. And we'll update people, and as well as try and get additional community input on the progress of that.
What time is the meeting?
I think it's
4 to 7?
Yeah, I believe there's one in the late afternoon at the library that day, and there's also a leaders group that morning at 7:30, a breakfast at
Yes.
the Kensington.
Yeah, leadership group at 7:30 in the morning, and then I think it is 4
4 to
4
7
I
at the
believe is the
downtown
time
library.
on the 18th.
Excellent, thank you. Any other announcements, comments? I would like a motion to approve the minutes of May 1st.
So moved.
Support? Any corrections, additions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, it is approved. Subcommittee reports. Partnerships and Economic Development Committee, Sandy and Joan. You want the first one? I'll take the second.
Okay,
Okay.
split it up again. We devoted some time to the economic development part of our mission, and we had Paul Krutko from Spark come to speak to us at the partnerships meeting, and it was really great because he can sum up all the things that they're doing and how we can interact with them. He talked about how placemaking matters, that it is important to create place, which is a lot of what we do, because people choose where they want to live and then they figure out a job, not the other way around, which is different than what people used to do. He talked about that businesses, there are a lot of businesses that they talk to who want to be downtown, but there isn't the right kind of space downtown for larger businesses, and we've discussed that before. And he said that time and again, corporate leaders raise the issue of lack of hotel and meeting space downtown, and that is something that is really an obstacle to us because there are other communities that have the ability to host large conferences, and they can attract people who then become aware of the area. And he mentioned in particular, I think, Greenville, South Carolina, which does have a lot of hotel and conference space downtown, and they have a big conference on some automotive topics where there were 6 people from the University of Michigan who were experts who came to speak there on this at this automotive conference, and it was in South Carolina. It wasn't here where we have the auto industry. So it's something that he mentioned is a big issue. Spark sees a lot of opportunities to partner with us on benchmarking against comparative communities and working to understand where places like Greenville might be doing a better job than what we're doing, and see what we can do better. And they have also made themselves available when we have RFP processes such as we're going to have with the Y-Lot, so that they can help us to look for appropriate businesses to locate their developers, etc. So it was really great. I think in the past, not by anybody's fault, we just haven't had that kind of interaction with Spark before, and now we really are looking at doing it and working together. So that was part of what we did at the last meeting. And then the next part.
And just to follow up with that, we also had 4 council members present during that, and I thought it was interesting in how engaged they were in the whole discussion with Spark and the questions that were asked. So I think it was a really powerful meeting. We also asked Dan Kettler to come and review a 618 South Main Street project with us because there have been some changes, downsizing in the project, and because we have a grant, a brownfield grant in place, we wanted to make sure that the project had not been significantly enough changed that we would need to revise or revisit even the work that we had done with this project, the review of the brownfield. It is not a significant enough change, and his numbers were very conservative on the first run through for us. So there really was there's no change in any of the calculators that we were going to use for the granting process. And it's just a reminder, the county serves as kind of the brownfield watchdog for both the city and the DDA, those funds. So they are intimately and always monitoring the situation as those projects get built. The one piece that we did, one concern that came up out of the conversation is that we are going to be having the streetscapes improved along the South Main Street, and including addition of new street lights. And we're still kind of in a quandary. We don't have a resolution yet from the question of whether or not there's an official moratorium in place or not. Apparently, it appears to be a staff-led moratorium, but something that's not official, so we need to have clarification on that. And in any other work that we need to do, whether or not we are able to continue to install lighting. I think that's a critical component to adding streetscape work to South Main or any of the downtown areas. So I appreciate you just wrote that down. Next month we'll be having some leaders in the affordable housing arena come and join us so that we can be as informed as possible as to what the joint city and county goals are and how we can align our work plans to best help in the process on that. And we are having that meeting 2 hours later than we usually do. It will start at 11 a.m. on June 12th.
Thank you. Any questions? The next report is the Operations Committee from Roger Hewitt. We'll have you start.
Okay. We have a number of financial reports and amendments to go through, so I will try to be concise on this. We go to page 8 first. Looking at the parking report for March. See, overall, our revenues are up about 7% over the previous March, although hourly patrons were down about 2.5%. The 7% is roughly probably the equivalent of the rate increase that took place last fall. So we're essentially flat in March, but the mitigating factors to that, I think if you look at, well, you had one less business day, so it was a smaller amount of days of revenue, and the little box at the bottom, you can see that the weather was considerably different this March than at the previous March. As well as spring break took place in March this year rather than February as it did the year before, so I think that's why the essentially revenues are roughly flat compared with the year before if you ignore the price increases. If you go to the next page, where we look at the third quarter, you can see again, hourly patrons are about flat, but revenues are up about 11%, definitely above the rate of the price increases. So again, the system, looking at the 3-month period, continues to be experience strong demand and good revenue growth, as we've experienced for really almost 2 years now. And last, probably the more accurate of all, the 9-month period. Again, revenues up 12%. Hourly patrons down a little bit, but that would indicate essentially that people who are coming down are staying longer. As we're clearly seeing, again, revenue growth above the level of price increases. So usage is strong throughout the system, and should point out the library lane parking structure is, as we'll get in there, is much stronger than we anticipated in the first year, the demand in there. And I believe we are almost to the point of starting a wait list for monthly parkers, which has good and bad things. It shows a very strong growth and strong demand in the parking system. It is also filling up certainly faster than we ever anticipated, which will force us to face problems down the road probably sooner than we thought we would. Any questions on the parking report?
Problems or opportunities?
Both. But as an indicator, I mean, my personal business, certainly looks like downtown is very strong these days, and the parking system again reflects that. So, continue to be very encouraging about the state of downtown. Questions? Okay. Next, we have the third quarter budget report, which I'm going to go over very briefly. This is a month late due to my absence at the last meeting, and is sort of dated by what will be the next part of my report, which is the final revision of our 2012-2013 budget. But I'll just go mention a few of the notes on changes reflected from the original budget versus what we anticipated year-end. The Zingerman's grant and responding costs. Again, the timing on the library lane costs and TIF. If we go into parking, the parking revenue, that, as you see, $1.28 million increase in revenue. As I've mentioned before, is the loan we got on the new parking equipment from Republic Parking. Public accounting laws require that we show this as revenue in the year we get it, and then deduct the interest as expenses over that period of time. It's not the way we do it in the private sector, but it's the way it has to be done in the public sector. So that shows a significant amount of increased revenue above anticipated that was really a one-time deal due to the loan. Again, differences in operating costs are the construction timing. There are some utility costs have been higher than anticipated, as have bank charges. Those bank charges are primarily the credit card charges. As increasing percentage of our customers use credit cards, the fees we pay for those credit cards continue to go up, which is happening to everybody. And timing on repair work is the difference on the maintenance expenses on the parking maintenance. And the housing, we're bouncing around on this. The village, as I'll show in the final, the Village Green $400,000 grant for affordable housing in that apartment complex will not take place this calendar year because they aren't finished. But we have done a grant to Dawn Farms and 2 grants to Baker Collins, which compensate for that. We'll go over that in the budget revision.
Calendar year or fiscal year?
Pardon me?
Fiscal
Fiscal
year.
year.
They better be done before December.
Well, actually, I think they probably want to be done well before that. Walk by it almost every day. Let's see. Okay. Here show graphically what's shown on the previous page.
20 minutes.
And the lighter line is the budgeted, and the darker line is the actual. This is the third quarter, so you can see on TIF, we are nearly at what we budgeted. Operating expenses are actually quite a bit lower as our capital expenses, but again, that will change the final budget revision. Parking income is more than 3/4 of what we anticipated. Again, part of that being the loan that we had to put in. Go to that. And then the following are the details of the balance sheets. Just briefly on TIF, we have a current fund balance of $5.3 million. You can see the details of the income statement on the next page. Housing, we're at just under 700,000. Again, with the detail on the next page. Parking fund, we are at 6.4 million. And again, the detail and broken down by parking structure. And parking maintenance, about 780,000. And finally, on this part, we have now also the April parking numbers. We went through March. So you can see we had one additional business day as well as better weather. Even though the University of Michigan graduation was moved into May, you can see a pretty dramatic increase in both revenues and hourly patrons. Again, it's probably better to look at the quarterly and the larger parts, because there is always going to be fluctuation month to month based on weather, events, number of days. But again, more indication that there's a very strong demand for parking downtown. Questions? All right. Next, we have a DDA resolution to increase the number of parking spaces for the varsity development under city's contribution in lieu of framework. And I would like to move the resolution for the committee.
And there's support. Moved and supported.
Okay. As Mr. Moore indicated during the talk, there is a request to increase the number of parking in lieu of permits for this project from the 2 originally requested to a total of 7. And I actually have a question or two for Mr. Moore.
Would you come forward? Thank you, Mr. Moore.
I was a little confused on the math here when we, if I understand the letter here, you're required to have 76 spaces in the, by your site plan approval. You only had 70 for residents originally, and one of those was lost during construction because of additional equipment that had to be installed. So you have 69 spaces on site, hence the request for the additional 7. However, there were additionally 2. The reason this wasn't part of the original proposal was there were going to be 2 additional car spaces for zip cars that would have counted as 4 spaces each. It would have put you over the total. But the developers decided not to put those zip cars in because of access issues to the general public. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, that's my understanding, is that in order for a zip car to do the deal, they wanted the general public to have access to them, when the intent was that they'd be for the residents, and that's why the city permits you to count them, because parking that's required on site is designed for that project, not for...
Okay, so it was a misunderstanding or needed a clarification on that. What happened to those 2 parking spaces the zip cars were going to go into?
Those 2 spaces are on adjacent property, currently under the same ownership structure. But since it's not part of the site plan for the varsity project, there apparently was some issue with counting those 2 spaces since they're off-site of the project for which the site. In other words, that second parcel was never site planned with the first parcel.
Even though they were going to allow the zip cars to be included into the parcel?
Yes.
So those 2 are just going to be leased out then as...
Well, they'll still be available to the tenants of the 416 Huron building that's there.
But the planning department will not allow you to count those toward the total.
It's my understanding that there would have to be some kind of recorded easement or something giving varsity the right in perpetuity to have those 2 parking spaces on the other parcel. And that hasn't been resolved.
Okay. That's the explanation. And we're talking about two additional, we're talking, it's clearly that the project needs to get approval of these parking spaces to get their certificate of occupancy. Is that my understanding?
correct.
So I guess the question is, do we want to approve 5 additional for a grand total of 7? Or do we want to wait and see if that easement can be enacted in perpetuity? Anyone have any thoughts?
I'm sorry, is that something that the developer is interested in pursuing? Or has that just been dropped?
It's my understanding that they would prefer to have the 5 additional spaces for a total of 7, so that the tail can't wag the dog, kind of a thing. That if the easements can't be arranged, they don't have to come back again.
Also seems like a bit of an encumbrance on the adjacent property, for 2 parking spaces.
But they
are
own it.
hardly worth it. Yes.
And they had to keep
But-
it because it was historic. They couldn't necessarily tear it down or move it as much as they might have wanted to.
But that, the whole easement process could take months and months, and meanwhile, I think we could appropriate it, and then it seems like later they could come back and say, no, we don't need them, or something like that if necessary.
Well, I think there is a timing issue, certainly. Of course, it's been better if this had come up sooner, so we had more time to investigate that, but they are approaching completion, and I would imagine that the easement, even if it is able to be enacted, would take months and months of work. And so I guess I would support the increase to a total of 7.
And these are at a premium cost,
Yes, they're 20% above the going monthly rate.
and they abide by the same terms that any other permit holder would have, so it's still in a sense a first come, first serve situation.
Yes, if the structure they are allocated to is full, yeah, they can't get in.
So they are no different than any other permit holder in the system.
Correct, other than they pay 20% above the
Then they pay a
going
premium
rate.
for that
Wait,
coverage.
so they can be open and not have the passes? My understanding is they were going to be given bumped to the front of the wait list and or taken hourly out of the system, because if we're talking about most of our decks, we've got a wait list, right? So they can be open without those passes being available? I thought they had to have them.
My understanding is they have to have them.
So
They would-
if we're talking
If
about-
there is a wait, they would jump to the front, or we would decrease hourly, or more likely, it would be an attrition thing that, there is although there is our wait lists, the wait lists turn over generally pretty quickly these days. There's not generally a long wait, depending, of course, on the structure.
I mean, given the amount of spots and given the holdup of that size of a building, I'm okay with it as well, but I'd love to see the committee sooner rather than later adjust this, especially given other pending projects and the
Yeah.
other problems we've had because of not having
I
a...
think the committee is very focused on the need to try to rationalize the use within the system. I would point out that this is an ordinance passed by City Council, not a DDA policy as far as the parking in lieu of. We do have a veto power if there are no spaces available, and we have the right on where to place them. But we are responding to a city ordinance.
But would the developers care if we put those passes, say, in One North Main?
Obviously, they would prefer that they not be at the most remote location.
All I know is if I was on
Something-
that wait list and I kept getting bumped or things like this, I would be frustrated, given the cost of the system. So
Yeah.
sooner rather than later, in the absence of, whether or not it's our requirement to provide this for the parking in lieu, doing this piecemeal, given the amount of construction is.
I agree with you completely that we are indeed trying to, as you can see, the demand of the system is increasing at a significant rate, and we are doing trying to catch up with the very dynamic and changing system that we're dealing with. But yes, I completely agree. We need a rationalized system.
Further discussion?
I
Keith.
just concur with Newcomb about the need for a policy, just so that exactly that reason it's not seemingly random who gets it. And I'll probably be, in fact, I'll be the gadfly vote and will be voting against it, just as, if nothing else, to be a reminder to everyone here that we do have to have a policy in place before this gets out of hand.
Just to save our own peace of mind.
Right.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor of the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
It passes. Thank you.
All right. Next, on page 24. We have a resolution to adopt the DDA budget for fiscal year 2013-2014. And if you look on my own copy, what page is that?
So 25 is the council amendment.
Amendments.
26.
26, yeah.
26 begins with amendment.
According to state law, we propose a annual budget that is then approved or amended and approved by city council, and then we formally adopt that budget. In the past, there have been, I think if we can only recall one time there's been a change to that, but there were a couple changes at council this year, and we are now have a revised budget that reflects those changes. If you look on page 25, the first column, the TIF column, we are revising our first of all, we're revising our income based on new information from the city assessor's office to a total of just over $4.5 million of TIF revenue this year. Then the council changes are under the transfer under TIF, under the transfer, interfund transfers, we are increasing the transfer to the housing fund from $100,000 to $400,000, a $300,000 increase. And we are increasing the capital costs from $300,000 in our original budget to $568,000 to replace the street lights on Main Street, which apparently are deteriorating. That is not the whole cost, but that amount reflects the increase in TIF revenue from our original budget amount.
Isn't that number 590 now? Did that move up from the last meeting?
There were some confusions. We had received a number that was 590. That also included the amount we had also shown of $35,000. So the actual amount is 568 in addition to what you had already seen. And of the 568, 300,000 going to housing, we're showing the remaining 268 is, or whatever that number is, going to the light poles. The council resolution asked that we provide 300,000 to the light poles, but we're just showing you the 268, which is the differential. We're working with city staff on the remaining amount. We've confirmed the total cost for the light poles will be $516,000, including warranties, labor, and so forth. So a resolution will be going to the council, I think, within the month, asking for council approval to appropriate the remaining several hundreds of thousands from the general fund to cover the light poles. We've met with staff, we've met with the Main Street Association, we have a timing and a scenario for those light poles. But what you have are the numbers, not the project approval. We'll be coming back to you in July with an actual project approval, which will actually then direct this more completely. But we wanted you to have this as a holding place. I know there's a lot of numbers changing.
On the second column, under housing, under transfers from other funds, that $400,000 that is the intertransfer fund from TIF we just mentioned is now shows up as income under housing, which is an increase of $300,000. And we also have changed the housing expenses on the Village Green Affordable Housing. The $400,000 that had been budgeted for this current fiscal year that's just ending, as I said, since the project is not completed, will be paid in the upcoming fiscal year, we assume. So that shows up as an expense under housing that was not originally there. Still leaves our housing fund balance at about $382,000.
Okay. I have a problem with the $300,000 going to the housing fund when we've been working pretty hard to contribute to affordable housing, but not having a real clear path of how we do that. And it's been a struggle over the last 8 years that I've been sitting at partnerships and trying to do this, is to find solid projects and a reason to invest in affordable housing in downtown. Not a reason, a method of investing in downtown. So this seems to be very arbitrary when there are very clear needs otherwise for the even the streetlights. I think that we've been very good about putting money aside for the housing. We cut back a couple of years while we're building the parking structure, but we have begun to reinvest and put money aside. I just find this very challenging right now to say that we accept what council has proposed here by moving this arbitrary amount of money over to housing without a project that's specifically ready to go. And it's unfortunate that the dialogue was not approached beforehand, and that they had actually come to partnerships and had a discussion with either the chairs of the committee or the chair of the DDA to say, is this a useful thing for you to do? But rather very kind of arbitrary and off the cuff. It seemed like an 11 o'clock hour change to the budget. What sort of flexibility do we have at this point? Because quite frankly, I don't see this as a benefit to anything that the DDA is doing as far as affordable housing goes. And I don't say that this benefits the downtown in any way. To move this over here in a holding pattern, waiting for us to find a project to invest.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, Sandy, but unfortunately state law is pretty clear that our budget must be approved by city council, and then we approve our budget after they approve. So I don't necessarily disagree, but the law is the law.
Well, isn't grammatically, it looks like in the two resolves we're forced to increase our housing fund, but we're requested to put money aside for the light poles. So we could just say no to the light poles until city council comes back to us and says, let's talk about that 300 for the housing. Because they've only requested the one and forced the other one.
Interesting. Is there any... Can you shed some light on this, John?
Oh, these issues were talked about at the council meeting. The point that I made, and I was unsuccessful in convincing other council members that the dollars, there's only a limited amount of dollars, and there were council members who were the sponsors of the resolution who wanted to put more money into affordable housing and was able to offer a compromise.
Yes,
I think the trade-off that I tried to make them understand that the light poles need to be replaced. There's 3 or 4 that have blown down in windstorms. And it's kind of a signature of our city, is the main street and the particular lights that we have there. I don't think we want any of them to fall over on anybody in a windstorm. But not to say that that's a particular danger. But council as a whole, and particularly sponsors of the resolution, wanted to make a statement about affordable housing, and they wanted to do it with DDA dollars rather than general fund dollars, which is obvious because it's a trade-off. So those arguments were made
So I
at
have
the council meeting.
I have a question to you. The city's general fund then will have to cover the balance of the expensive light poles.
I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to do that. There may be council members who don't see place a high value on the light poles on Main Street. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. I can't predict that. But I'll certainly be voting to support replacing money for the replacement of the light poles.
And I guess to my point is that that's, to me, a priority at this particular moment. I think the other is kind of just feel-good money or money because there was pressure for affordable housing without really a commitment for the council to find a way to fund this. So I won't support this. I know that it will pass and that we need to keep going, but I can't support the way that this is. It's nonsensical to me.
Susan, are any of the light poles in front of Ashley Muse or city apartments that have our affordable housing dollars already in place, and then we could allocate affordable housing dollars to pay for some of the light poles?
So the light poles that need replacement are on Main Street between Huron and William, not south of William and not north of, not north of, what am I doing? West of Main Street. So the light poles that we've put down here are not going to be affected by, say, the affordable housing contribution at First and Washington, or what we've done in the past at Ashley Muse and others.
I would just point out that Craig Hoopie, who's obviously the staff member most responsible for these types of infrastructure things, has expressed the need as urgent.
Yes. John?
Along the lines of Sandy, I'm not as much concerned about the debate about light replacement versus housing and how that happens as I am about the process and the lack of planning. And I can't help myself. I'm an architect, and you have to plan years ahead. And I agree with Sandy that sort of the arbitrary nature of it is unclear. It's not to say we don't support affordable housing in any way, shape, or form. It's just that we need to do it within the context of a process and some planning. So I would agree with Sandy that I'm not very inclined to support this at this point myself.
Joan?
I would also note that this is for the fiscal year 14 budget, and should there be no appropriate projects, that the budget for the next year will just have to be amended according to experience rather than random decisions.
Good point. And we will be meeting with the housing community at the June partnerships meeting next week at 11 o'clock. And we will see what is in the pipeline. And to my knowledge, nothing yet. But in the past number of years, we've spent over $3 million on affordable housing. Our commitment is clear. And light poles are an emergency. So I don't know what choice we have. Mr. Mayor.
It's given that you have that meeting and that the city is going to be looking at action, I would hope we will take action on light poles. You have the option of postponing this to the next meeting to see how those two things work out.
I think we need to adopt the budget. We need to adopt the budget.
We need to do it today.
Yeah.
Because it's the end of the fiscal year.
That's right. Sorry, the next meeting will be 2-3 days after.
Bob?
But I assume we can amend the budget along the way. If we decide to do that in July, that could be done.
Okay. Keith?
I was just going to agree with John about the process. It does strike me as odd that on the one hand, we're getting direction from City Council saying we're looking for a more autonomous DDA, and then at the same time seeking to micromanage how we're spending our money. On the other hand, I also agree that with what our chairwoman just stated, that we have a commitment to affordable housing, and the other is an emergency or urgent, or what was the statement?
Urgent.
Urgent. There we go. So I'll be supporting it with reservations.
Any further discussion on the budget amendment? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No.
2 nays. Thank you. It does pass. Anything further, Roger?
Oh, yes. If you will turn to page 31, I believe you have.
Okay.
We have another resolution. As anyone who's been on board for a while is aware, state law requires that at the end of our fiscal year, which ends June 30th, before the end of our fiscal year, we amend our budget to reflect the actual income and expenses as nearly as possible. And we're required to do this every year, so this is always part of the June board meeting to modify our budget. Now, we have already, I should mention to emphasize, this is the 2012-2013 budget, the budget for the fiscal year that we are currently in and will end at the end of this month. We've already done one revision last winter to reflect some of the costs of the library lane parking structure and the 5th and Division improvements. As I think I've mentioned a number of times, last year at this time we did this, we budgeted all our best estimate of what expenses for those 2 projects would be into that last fiscal year, a year from now, because we were uncertain when the construction would be completed and when the invoices would come in. We have a rather, state law puts us in a rather difficult position given that we are primarily construction. And the construction season starts in the spring and runs through the fall, but our fiscal year ends right in the middle of it. We are required to put into our budget, into our actual expenses, all work done up to June 30th that is invoiced before August 31st. So we will certainly be getting, and have in the past, be getting invoices for doing work up to June, but will not, at which point we have to have our budget modified and amended, but which we may not get invoices for another 2 months. It's a somewhat difficult balancing issue. So last year we put in all the money for the library lane parking structure, even though we were fairly sure it wouldn't all be invoiced by August 31st, but we don't want to violate state law by ending up with more expenses than we had budgeted for. So essentially in our previous budget resolution, and this resolution revision, I should say, we are putting in those final costs for the library lane parking structure, the 5th and Division. All those costs are in, all those bills have been paid, and those are reflected in the final budget revision. If you look on page 33, the next page. Get some high points on this.
Okay, you're looking
That's
at
our 31, I think.
31.
Yeah, 31, I think, is, 33 is the long page.
Oh, pardon me, 31.
Short page.
Yeah, the short
The
page.
page without numbers.
The page without the numbers, yes.
Okay. 32.
Yeah. I don't think there is a 32 on mine. But anyway, yes, page 32. Essentially, there is not a very significant, not really any significant change in TIF other than the Zingerman's Brownfield grant that was paid out that was not in our previous budget revision. Capital costs were up a little bit, but not much over what we had originally budgeted. So there's not a lot of change in the TIF side, other than the Zingermans. Housing, as I mentioned before, the Village Green project was taken out of the budget since we are not spending that $400,000 this fiscal year. What we've added in the $150,000 grant to Dawn Farms, and the grand total of $560,000 for the Baker's Commons work, which leaves us, as you can see, with an anticipated fund balance of about $382,000 in the housing fund. We'll be adding $400,000 to it by the new budget we just adopted, but also taking $400,000 out for the Village Green project. Clear on that. On the parking, the high points on that are parking revenues are higher than we had originally budgeted. This is almost entirely due to the Library Lane structure generating significantly more revenue than we had budgeted for. Typically, new structures do not generate a lot of revenue for the first couple of years. It takes people a while to find them and start using them, changing their habits, and you're finding they are finding the Library Lane structure and changing their habits at a much more rapid pace than we had anticipated.
I was interested in your comments where you said that we may have to soon start making a waiting list for the monthly parkers.
Yes, it's more reason to have a strong positive. I will just to digress slightly for Newcomb here. It is the challenge with coming up with a policy is we don't ask people who they are and why they're here on their way in to a parking structure, and trying to balance monthly demands, hourly demands between workers, guests. It's not a nice simple way to put it together. It's a challenge.
Nothing we do is simple.
Boy, is that the truth. Moving further down, parking under miscellaneous income. This is something we've shown in a different category before, but this is money we get from the University of Michigan for their share of the costs in operating the Forest Street structure, of which they own 1/3 and we own 2/3 of it. We operate it, they reimburse us for expenses. And then the $1,278,000, again, this is the loan from Republic Parking for new parking equipment that we, by accounting regulations, have to show as income this year. We increased fringe benefits a little bit because something called VEPA, which is the city's pension fund, might get increased, and so we put a little
health care.
Yes. So we put a little extra in for that. Public parking expenses are up a little bit. And we've increased alternative transportation a little bit to make sure we're covered on any contingencies on that. So as you see, we end up with a anticipated fund balance of $1.1 million in the parking fund. And the maintenance fund is getting down to its lowest level. Again, we've been using maintenance dollars to pay for the underground structure, as we have been using TIF dollars and parking dollars. That's now over, and is the upcoming year's budget. You notice we are transferring $4.4 million back into the parking maintenance fund. So that will take a big jump next year. Overall, our capital costs are $7.7 million. About 1.6 of this is the down payment on the First and Washington project, and about 1.3 are additional work and both maintenance and equipment, primarily equipment, some additional finishing in the office and the underground structure that wasn't in the original project, as well as the balance to complete the Library Lane project in the 5th Division. So we can say financially, that project is completed and been paid for, and we've come out on the other end with a balance of about, anticipated balance of about $3.3 million, which is a lot better than not having a balance.
You're moving this.
And I am moving this budget revision.
Supporting this?
Yes, I'm supporting it.
Thank you. Okay, it's been moved and supported. Discussion on this draft budget resolution number 2.
Couple
Newcomb.
of questions. So if we're required twice a year to amend this, or just
No,
once?
just once a year. We did a mid-year budget revision because we had, as I've mentioned, all the construction, a huge amount of construction costs had come in that were not reflected in the budget. And we felt for that, this year, because of that big expenditure, doing a mid-year revision gave us a little, at least some idea of where we might be.
And we're only required at the end to update expenses that were above budget, but not adjustments to revenue. We're not we're reflecting it, but we're not required to.
I believe we're required to show both anticipated expenses and anticipated revenues.
Yes.
Yeah. But we are not allowed to spend more than our expenses cannot be above what we have budgeted, our actual expenses. So
Without
we are a
changing
little, what?
Without changing.
Yeah, we have to revise our budget now to reflect any expenses we incur until through the end of this month, which makes it a little
Does it
challenging.
go back to city council then for approval?
No, this does not. They only approve our budget for the upcoming fiscal year. They do not approve our final budget that reflects our actual expenses and income.
And there's no threshold of why we would change it? Like,
What?
in terms of the state doesn't care why we might need to change it or choose to change it?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
That I've never experienced.
It's up to us. What we can't do is we can't have negative fund balances, and we can't spend more money than we've budgeted for.
Too many people have been staying up too late on Mondays then.
Any other questions on this particular resolution? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Thank you. Anything else, Roger?
Let's see my rather long list here. I'm probably stealing John's thunder here, but we do have a temporary certificate of occupancy on the parking structure at First and Washington. I don't believe it's open to the public, but we do have the temporary certificate of occupancy. No, I think my only thing is that we are changing the next committee meeting from June 26th to June 19th at 11 a.m. And I will turn everything else over
Well,
to
thank you
other
very much. You do a great job.
co-committee chairs.
We will change this over to John Moat, who must have some reports on things like the new bike house.
Yes, yeah, it's always tough following Roger because after all these numbers, we're all sort of stunned and confused. But
You aren't the only one.
Might have kept the kids a little bit longer if we started.
yeah, right. Yeah, this is fun. Bike house had its launch a couple of weeks ago. We had a nice group of people come. Thank you to, I think, Lee and Joan and John, and I think John came.
I was there. Oh, yeah.
John did a very nice little speech, a little ribbon cutting. People seemed enthusiastic. It's already 75% full. It seems all good. So far, the feedback's been terrific. And I particularly want to thank Amber and Jada. They did a wonderful job with the launch and with the whole project. It came together very nicely. Jada did a great job in kind of getting ready for the event. Amber in the planning part of it went off very smoothly. It's all good. It's all good. It's fun. It's part of our alternative transportation system moving forward.
And one point I'd like to mention is that our Get Downtown director, 10 minutes after this was done, she began her maternity leave, and I think she has a new baby.
Yes, they are celebrating in addition to the family. I believe it was Saturday night.
Great. So that's good news.
Yeah. The other thing that we discussed at the last operations meeting, Amber did a presentation on the streetscape framework plan that I think most of you are aware of is being discussed. There have been some very constructive meetings with city staff in looking at how to develop the streetscape plan, and it's again that notion of, how do we best use our sidewalks and our spaces. And so the benefits include, as we move forward, just the collaboration with the city itself for purposes is a positive thing. The idea that when we start looking at future streetscape projects, we something that's a basis to start from and a bit of a standardization, if you will, and so forth that we can work towards. And also the hope that it will reduce design costs moving forward to some degree, because again, we'll have these sort of standards and guidelines as we move forward. So at our last operations meeting, people seemed quite enthusiastic to pursue this. So what we expect is that it'll probably cost about $200,000 in next year's budget if we want to pursue it. And we anticipate bringing a resolution forward at the next meeting.
Great, thank you.
That's all I
Anything
have.
else?
That's it.
Anything?
I'm sorry, John, you may have said this, 200,000 our expense or?
Yes.
Our expense.
Yes.
Can I find partners?
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
Let's hope so.
The only thing I have construction-wise, we've been walking around downtown looking for trip hazards, et cetera. The city is planning on fixing the town sidewalks, making repairs they're making in other parts of the city, although that's not going to start until next year. We're just trying to get out ahead and do some minor concrete repairs, cold patch, et cetera, just to take care of the obvious trip hazards. And we will be beginning the handicap accessible ramps on Liberty and State Street, Liberty Main Street, the ones that we've been holding off on, which are the most complicated ones to do. Because of vaults, we will be tackling this summer, I hope before our fair.
I don't envy that. Great. And the next meeting, as you said, is June 19th at 11 a.m. Is there any other DDA business?
I just had a remark or two. It was a spectacular weekend downtown, and the African American Festival, I think, was one of the best attended they've ever had. The music was great. I actually got a signed photo from Martha Reeves.
Wow.
Who looks great and sounds great. The Dexter Ann Arbor Run was wonderful, and we heard at the Downtown Marketing Task Force that the Main Street, the head of the association, believes it may have been the best attended Taste of Ann Arbor ever. And then the food was I can attest, I was on a team with Susan. We were judging appetizers, and it was almost impossible to make a choice. We had at least 5 that scored 10. So the food continues to get better, but I think it was a great time down, a great weekend downtown, and a fun time was had by all.
I mentioned Prairie Home Companion, I believe sold out Hill Auditorium as well.
Yeah.
Things are happening. Is there any other audience participation at this time? Come to the podium. You have 4 minutes.
I won't need that luck. Good afternoon, Peter Allen. I thought an update on what happened with the city-sponsored RFP for the broker for the South 5th Ann Arbor Y-side, former Ann Arbor Y-side, is important. They opened the bids last Friday. There were 3 bidders. Jim Chaconis, of course, with Colliers and his team. Tim Guest and C.B. Richard Ellis and their team. And I presented a proposal on behalf of my company, Peter Allen Associates. Their timetable is to interview in late June, early July, pick somebody in the next 30 to 60 days, and council sometime around August 1st. I've already heard of interest from boutique hotels, from grocery stores, from certainly ground level retailers in demand. So I think the mix of uses are going to be very consistent with what the connecting William Street idea came up with in their plan. I think from a market standpoint, I think their recommendations are very solid, thorough, and achievable. I think one of the implications for you to think about is, as I've read it, and I haven't read the details, the proceeds go to the Housing Trust Fund from the sale of the Y lot. I think the market value of that lot could be, or that 30,000 square feet could be $5 to $7 million or more, depending on how it's configured. I think the idea of adding air rights on top of the Blake Transit Center is very feasible, but that would not be your proceeds directly, it would from the TIF standpoint. So what you think about doing with the money, what you think about the uses, to do any further update with the Connecting William Street idea, I think would be important subjects for future meetings. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Just to point out that the city
John.
would, of course, cover the debt and the expenses associated with the lot.
Net proceeds.
Net proceeds, we understand that. Thank you.
However they're defined.
However they're defined. We'll get to that later. Any further business? Motion to adjourn. Support. We stand adjourned.